All right, good to go. So we're going to start with introductions today. So my name is Rosemary Lower, and I am the Quality Assurance Specialist with Maryland Excels for Harford and Cecil counties. If I look familiar to you and you are from Howard County, I was for a time covering Howard County for about a year. So some of the names look familiar, but this training is going out to everyone across the state of Maryland. So if you're joining us from another county and we haven't had the privilege to meet yet, hello and welcome. I have been a quality assurance specialist for 7 years now. Prior to that, I have about 32 years in early childhood education. 25 of that was spent in a center as an assistant teacher and then a teacher, assistant director for 10 years, and I'm also a mom. I tell everyone that I know that the early childhood realm is where I belong because I currently have 2 teenagers, and although I love them, do not like the teenage years. So I love my children, but man, oh man, this requires a whole different type of expertise. So early ed is where I belong. I know it, I feel it, and I live it every day. I am joined today by the magnificent Ashley Hensley. Ashley, could you please introduce yourself?
Of course. My name is Ashley Hensley, and I am one of the quality assurance specialists for Baltimore County. We have a very big county, so we have 2. I've been in the field for a little over 20 years. I have a 6-year-old, and I too know that I'm early childhood education because I'm right on that brink of, okay, yep. And but I love it, absolutely love it. I was a center director. I taught pre-K. I was with Head Start, early Head Start, 3rd grade teacher, all the things. So I love doing this role. I love being able to help out family providers, centers, be high quality, and share my experiences and share the experiences that you share with me to others, to just give that information all over. Rosemary and I swear we're the resource queens. She was my resource queen as a center director. She was my QAS. She's part of the reason why I took this position, because I just absolutely loved what she did for me, and love doing that for everybody. So welcome, and I hope you guys enjoy training today.
Thanks, Ashley. Ashley's going to go ahead and mute herself, and she's going to pull up the PowerPoint. So again, you're going to see your screen change. Just bear with us for a second. This is how the tech works. And then we will get started. We'll give her just a second. And I just saw that someone popped in to join us. Mrs. Colorado, please make sure that you navigate to the chat box and sign in for us with the sign-in link. All right, so today's training is diving into domains, using the Maryland Excel standards to guide domain-based lesson planning. Hopefully everybody's in the right training, and if not, please hang out so that you can join us and learn something amazing. Our outline for the presentation today is we're going to begin with a short introduction of Maryland Excels. We're going to talk about each of the developmental domains and how they have changed. We're also going to play a fun game of Domain Jeopardy, and then we'll have our closing. Go ahead to the next slide. So we're going to start with our introduction to Maryland Excels. And Ashley's going to navigate there to the next slide. And we're going to just talk about what Maryland Excels is. Oh, my apologies. We have to do our session objectives. Give me just a second. All right. We are going to define quality rating and improvement systems. It's our hope that we can gain an understanding of all of the domains of development in early childhood as they relate to Maryland Excels. We're going to practice how to incorporate multiple domains within a single activity or learning area. And we're going to explore intentionality and differentiation in developing activities and lesson plans. So those are our objectives. Go ahead. Now we're going to talk about Maryland Excels. So what is Maryland Excels? Many of you have probably heard of the term Quality Rating and Improvement System. We are a QRIS. That is how it is abbreviated for childcare and early education programs. that meet nationally recognized standards. So what happens is we have these national standards that were developed through programs like the NAEYC. They decide what is best practice based on research, based on experience, and they create these standards. Then each state takes a look at those standards and chooses those that align best with their education system. The standards that were chosen for Maryland were put into the Maryland Excels system. The point behind Maryland Excels is to recognize childcare and early education programs that provide high quality experiences for children. And we don't just expect you to know how to do that. We help you through that process. We help by explaining the standards and helping you to align your policies and procedures with the standards that emulate best practice. What's unique about Maryland is that we don't just look at child care centers and family child care providers. We sort of cover the gamut of early education. We look at centers, family child care, large family homes, LOC facilities, which are also called letter of compliance facilities. We look at those public and private pre-K programs, school age only programs. So we sort of cover every kind of program that works with early education. We encourage programs to increase their level of quality and help to define a pathway for them to achieve excellence. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that upcoming. And then our last goal is to provide families with information, access, and choices about high quality early education and school age programs for their children. We can go ahead to the next slide. So this is sort of the absolute best icon that we can use to explain what Maryland Excels is all about. It's about continuous quality improvement. So we know that no program is ever perfect, and we certainly don't expect you to be. But what we want you to do on an ongoing basis is to take a look at your program, assess what you're doing really, really well, and what things might need your attention or might need some extra improvement. We want you to make those improvements, and then we want you to communicate those improvements to the families and the staff, if you have staff, in your program. Oh, we had somebody find the emoji. I love it. Once you communicate those changes, then you stop and you wait and you assess again. I'm going to give you an example of this. So when I was a director, we had a late fee policy for 100 years. And that late fee policy was 1 minute, every minute that you were late after 6:30, it was $1 a minute. And that worked beautifully for the 20 years before I took over as director. About 3 years into my position as director, I had a group of families that were consistently late, coming 5 minutes late, then 10 minutes late, then a little bit later than that. Then we got up to 30 minutes late. We knew we had to stop, take a look at our policy, and we needed to make a change because this wasn't going to fly. And those of you who have had late parents know from where I speak, because it's very frustrating. You want to be understanding. You want to be accommodating. You know that there are emergencies that happen. But you also need to protect your business, and you need to protect your staff if you have them. So we realized we needed to make a change. So we decided that the best way to impact the families was financially, so that we were going to keep our policy at $1 a minute for the first 5 minutes, but then we were going to add a caveat that every minute after 5 minutes, it was going to be $5 additional a minute. Miss Colorado, the training is diving into domains. I just saw your question pop up in the chat. So we decided to make it $1 a minute for the first 5 minutes and $5 a minute for every minute after that. We wrote a letter on our center letterhead. We sent it out to the families. We sent it out to the staff. We posted it on their door. We made sure that everyone was aware that effective immediately, this was going to be the new late fee policy. Once it was communicated, we put it into effect, and we waited. We waited about a week and a half, 2 weeks, just to see what would happen. Was this new policy that we created going to make a difference, or was it not? Sadly, when we reassessed, it didn't make a difference. The family that was okay paying $30 for, being a couple of minutes late, being that 30 minutes late, were okay with paying $60 for being 20 minutes late. And so we decided that we needed to improve this policy again. We needed to make more changes. So we sat down as a staff and we talked about what we could do to change this policy that might impact our families and help us alleviate the issue that we were dealing with. What we came up with as a group was that we would keep the financial part, $1 a minute for the first 5 minutes, $5 a minute for every minute after that, with an added caveat. On the third lateness, the child's enrollment would be terminated. Donna's given me some fist bumps, so she agrees. Honestly, I never, ever, ever wanted to turn a child away, and I never wanted to punish a child for a family's behavior. And that's the way I saw it. That was my mentality. I'm punishing this little one. But truth be told, their family was disrespecting the policies that we had put in place. And by not honoring those policies, they were disrespecting us, our business, and our staff. So we had to put our foot down or draw that line in the sand. The thing is, we were understanding, that's why we gave them 3 chances. We were understanding in the fact that, when the bridge collapsed, that's not something anyone can anticipate, correct? So go ahead, Ellen, did you want to say something?
No, I'm good. I'm sorry. I pressed the wrong button.
No problem. It was nice to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Sure. When the bridge collapsed, we certainly couldn't predict that, and we certainly weren't prepared for what would happen in terms of traffic that day and in the days surrounding. So you have to make exceptions. That's something that can't be foreseen. And so you understand that on a day like that, families might be late picking up their children. That's one. That you're giving them leeway to say, I understand that emergencies happen and we're dealing with that. But that's why we have emergency cards with backup individuals that can pick up the child. So we want to make sure that the families are respecting us the way we're respecting them. That's the point of this continuous quality improvement. You want to always take a look at your policies and figure out what's working well, what can we make improvements on? And when you make those decisions, you must communicate it with your staff and the families you serve, and then stop and wait. Your job isn't over then. Continuous quality improvement is continuous. It goes on and on and on. It's something that you want to revisit quite often. Any questions about that? Okay, so that's the basis of Maryland Excels, and that's the basis of how it works and why we put it into effect. So now that we have an understanding of Maryland Excels, it's important that we take a jump back in our history, and I'm really going to be taxing your brains at the moment, taking a look at the theorists in early education that we knew about from way back when. And I know if you're like me, you took these classes probably 100 years ago, and you're saying these names look really, really familiar, but I'm not positive about what it was that they did. No need to worry. We're going to go over it together. So you don't need to stress about what you remember and what you don't. So we're going to start with our first theorist, Jean Piaget. And one of the greatest things about Piaget is that he considered children little scientists, and he said that children construct knowledge through their experiences. He said children learn concrete or hands-on concepts first, and then they move on towards abstract or critical thinking. And you can see one of the quotes here: the goal of education is not to increase the amount of knowledge, but to create the possibilities for a child to invent and discover. That's where that concrete knowledge comes in. Then we have Marie Montessori. Marie Montessori's theory on early education is that children learn through hands-on play in a prepared environment that is teacher planned and facilitated, but child initiated and directed. This is where we get the idea of intentional teaching. We prepare the environment so that the children can learn, and they will. So Marie Montessori said, when a child is given a little leeway, he will at once shout, "I want to do it." But in our schools, which have an environment adapted to children's needs, they say, "Help me to do it alone," or "Help me to do it by myself." That's the idea there. Next, we have Howard Gardner. And Howard Gardner says that there are 8 types of human intelligence, each representing different ways of processing information. So we have verbal linguistic, or logical or mathematical, visual or spatial, musical, naturalistic, body kinesthetic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. That children might have a combination of these learning styles, which is important to remember when we choose materials and the types of activities presenting opportunities to learn in various ways. When I think of Howard Gardner, I feel like Howard Gardner really had his thumb on the pulse. I'm one of those people. I do not learn strictly by hearing. I have to hear it. I have to see it. I have to do it. That's the only way I can learn. I have had friends growing up through elementary school, middle school, high school, and then college that they could hear it, and it was ingrained in their brain. That wasn't me. Until I actually got my feet wet doing it, it wasn't something that was going to sink in. So Howard Gardner said the biggest mistake of past centuries in teaching has been to treat all students as if they were variants of the same individual, and thus to feel justified in teaching them all the same subjects in the same way. This is where differentiation comes in. We have to remember that all children are unique and learn in unique ways. Finally, we have Friedrich Froebel, who coined the term kindergarten. Friedrich advocated for the importance of free play in learning. He said that play is the highest expression of human development in childhood, for it alone is the free expression of what is in a child's soul. So we just talked about these 4 different theorists who all had very unique points of view. However, do you see a common theme? Was there a theme that you saw throughout these theorists' ideas that sort of resonated throughout each of them?
That play is through learning.
Excellent. So we had people put in the chat, as well as we had Ashley unmute and let us know beautifully that children learn through play. They learn best through play. And that is one of the major takeaways that we want you to take away from this training. If you plan your day effectively, children will learn through play. Someone put in the chat, free expression is important, and that's absolutely correct. The more opportunities we give children to explore and experiment and investigate, the more learning will happen. We cannot talk about theorists without talking about one of the most important theorists, and that's Maslow. Maslow had a hierarchy of needs where he basically said, we cannot teach children, we cannot expect them to learn until their most basic needs are met. If a child comes into your program, and I always use the day after Halloween, as someone who taught in a classroom for 20 years, the day after Halloween was my very least favorite day. And although every part of me wanted to take off, I never did, because I knew that putting those little ones with a substitute was going to be a nightmare. The kiddos were up late, very, very late in many cases, because they're out trick-or-treating. They had been eating dinner of nothing but pure sugar. They were cranky, they were irritable, they hadn't eaten properly. They were just miserable. I knew that day was not a day to try to get them to do any type of structured activities that were led by me, meaning teacher directed. I knew that that was a day where I really had to give them grace and give them a lot of flexibility. Basic needs, those physiological needs have got to be met first before we can expect children to be able to be successful. They need air. We have to be able to breathe, correct? In order to be able to function and learn. They need basic necessities like water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing. If any of those pieces are missing, that child cannot learn because their body is lacking in its most basic necessities. Once we have all those basic physiological needs, then we need to make sure that that child feels safe and secure. And we do that every day when these little ones come into our programs by getting down on their level when they come in and saying, "Good morning, Donna. It's so wonderful to see you today." Reaching out our arms when they reach out their arms and giving them a big hug. I know that there were a lot of people during COVID that said, "Absolutely not. I'm not going down and hugging. I'm not hugging anybody." Spend a day in early education, and you'll see that those teachers found a way. They would let the little ones grab onto their legs and they would scoot down with their arm and squeeze them. So we're not going face to face, but we're still getting that hugging in. We need it and they need it. That's what creates that secure bond. Once you have that bond where you feel safe and secure, then you can feel loved and you feel like you belong to the program. And then it moves on through the hierarchy where we develop esteem for our children and then self-actualization where they have the desire to become whatever they want to be. Okay, so all of these theorists have really amazing ideas, but they're sort of led by Maslow's hierarchy. Until we have achieved those basic physiological needs, we can't expect them to move on beyond. Any questions about Maslow or any of the theorists? All right, we can move on to the next slide. So there are several places where we ask you to stop and take a look at all of the different lessons, your domains, the way that you're teaching children, what you're teaching children throughout Maryland Excels. But there are two standards in particular that we're going to focus on today. And the first one is DAP 5, the planning. How do you plan for these children? We want to make sure that our lesson plans include culturally competent, age-appropriate, domain-based activities. I'm going to stop there. Culturally competent, what does it mean?
It means like trying to include as many cultures as you have in your classroom, including ones that aren't in your classroom, so the kids learn about the world around them and the individuals they play with every day.
Excellent. So it's not just knowing that there are other cultures out there. It's actually, like Ashley said, including those cultures in your program. You want to make sure that every single culture that is represented in your program and beyond is reflected in your program. We want people of every shape, color, and size to come into the program and feel like, "Oh, I belong here. I feel welcome." That's a culturally competent environment. We want to make sure that it's age appropriate. How do we know if what we're planning is age appropriate? So Kylie said, "Well, are they able to do it?" That tells us whether it's developmentally appropriate. Absolutely. But how can we get an idea? How do I know that if it's age appropriate for me to start teaching algebra to my littles? Donna's laughing. She's like, "I don't even know algebra." I say the same thing. How do we know what exists out there?
Well, there's developmental goals for each age group, and if the children are meeting those goals, then you know what's appropriate for them. If they're not meeting the goals, then you know what you need to work on.
Exactly. There are things such as the CDC developmental milestones. It tells you what you should expect to start seeing at each age. And that gives you an idea of where to start. Not all of your children that are 2 years of age are going to all be doing the same things, but it gives you a rough idea of what you should be expecting to see them doing. Okay. Domain-based activities we're going to talk about here upcoming, and this is where we're going to talk about sort of some of those theorists again, and the way that they have described education. We want to make sure that what we're putting in our lesson plans is reflective of the children's interests and skills. How do we know what they're interested in and what their skill level is? I know Ashley knows the answer, but she's not the only one on the training. Somebody unmute and tell me, how do you know what your children are interested in?
You can find out what they're interested in by setting up centers and just kind of like doing some observations and see basically what their different interests are. And a lot of that could be like based around whatever kind of themes you might be focusing on at that time.
Beautiful, Miss Valerie. That's a perfect answer. You want to observe them. In the chat box, we had a couple of comments saying, talk to them and their parents and observe them. You can see the way they interact with on a day-to-day basis. What do they gravitate towards? Exactly. You have to observe them and you have to talk to them. Interacting with them, you will very quickly know what a child enjoys and what they do not enjoy. You're right. Somebody else put in the chat box their level of interest. Exactly. If they're interested in what you're doing, they like it. If not, move on. All About Me form. That's a wonderful place to start. Families will say at enrollment, hey, this is what my child likes. This is what they do really well. And this is where you need to put your focus. We can address their developmental needs. And again, through those observations and through those interactions, you're able to see what it is that the child does well and what they may need to work on. We want to make sure that we create our lessons based on those observations, but also based on assessments that we do periodically. And then information gained from families, like in the All About Me form, about their children. And the last piece is, by law, we know that parents do not have to share an IFSP or an IEP with us. Everybody know what an IEP or IFSP is? So for those that may not know, it's an individualized education plan or an individualized family service plan that is given to children that have diagnosed disabilities. And basically it outlines right now, here's what this child is working on, and here's how we can help them be successful in this area. And there's a whole team of people that work towards creating this form. And it's those that are most interwoven in that child's life at the time. So for an IFSP, it's going to be the families. It's going to be the child care provider if they're invited. It's going to be the child's pediatrician. And if there's anyone working with the child, like an occupational therapist or physical therapist, they're going to be on that team as well. For the IEP, that's based mainly on educational goals. And so we're going to have the administration, special educators, teachers at a school that are going to be on that plan, as well as if that child goes to before and after care, the child care provider can be on that team, the parents, the pediatrician, and any specialists that work with that child. It's important that we include in our handbook, in our policies, that we say, if your child has an IFSP or an IEP, please share a copy with us. And we ask that they do that, not because we want to violate their privacy, but because we want to make sure that we are educating their child the way that's going to create the most success for that child. And by making sure that everybody's on the same page, we're creating consistency and continuity. Okay? So the evidence that they want you to upload here in DAP 5 is that lesson planning process statement. So you should have a statement in your handbook that says, hey, parents, here's how we decide what we teach your children. And it's by including all of these elements of cultural competency, age appropriate, domain based. And when I asked you questions like, how do you know what the children are interested in? Put that in your policy. Because although you know, and all your other fellow early educators know, and we all know with Maryland Excels, your families have no idea why you do what you do. And this is your opportunity to share with them. So we make sure that they're reflective of the children's interests and skills. You want to know how? We observe them, we assess them, we interact with them, we speak to them. And that tells your families, you know, if I want to be involved in my child's life, I really have to do those things too. Okay, so this is DAP 5, and these are the requirements to get to a quality rated 5, which we as quality assurance specialists feel like if you're touching a policy once, get it to that level 5. So that's why we've included all of it here. Okay, so once we have our lesson planning policy, we're going to move on to DAP 6. This is the implementation portion. This is where we ask you to show us exactly what you're doing. Upload a recent lesson plan, upload your daily schedule, and let us see what you're doing in real time. We want to make sure that your lesson plan includes whole group time, small group time, individual learning experiences or one-on-one time. We want to make sure that you have adequate time for transitions. Lots and lots and lots of people forget transitions. Transitions are the piece of the day. I call it, this is my education mentality. We always called it, this was our Speedy Gonzalez Pokey Petunia time. And by that, I mean, if you have a group of 8 children or 20 children, depending on whether you're a family provider or a center, you want to go take the group outside. Before they go outside, they're going to have to go to the restroom. They're going to have to wash their hands. They're going to have to get their coats on, zip up their coats, and get in line. You're always going to have that child who I call Speedy Gonzalez. They get into the bathroom, they get their business done, they wash their hands barely, they're shaking them dry, they run over, get their coats on, they zip it up, and boom, they're in line. And then you have Pokey Petunia, who comes over, goes into the restroom, and knows that she has to try to use the restroom. And so she'll sit there for a while, thinking about her dissertation. Time is going by. And then you come in to check and say, you don't have to use the restroom? No, you don't. Okay, it's all right. Thank you for trying. You can wash your hands and come get your coat on. And then they go over to wash their hands and they're scrubbing for surgery, even though they haven't touched anything. And so, you know, they're water up to their elbows. They got soap. They have to rinse. They go to get their coat on. They're not real sure how to do that. They put it on upside down the first time. You have to walk them through it. By the time Pokey Petunia gets to line, Speedy Gonzalez has been there for 10 minutes. What happens when Speedy Gonzalez is sitting for 10 minutes with nothing to do? Miss Valerie just gave a side eye. I don't know whether that was on purpose or whether that was just, it was on purpose. Okay. Right. Kylie said he gets frustrated. He gets bored. Guess what? He's now a behavior problem. And I use he and she very interchangeably. It's just the titles I gave these children when I was teaching, Speedy and Pokey. Honestly, that's where your behavior problems lie. So you want to make sure that you have activities for those children to participate in so that they have something to keep them engaged while they're waiting for all of their friends to finish up to get to the next activity. So transition time is key on every daily schedule. We want to make sure you have time for literacy and for reading opportunities. So we want you to read to the children, and we want the children to read independently or to each other. Okay, so this is our lesson plan. We want to also make sure that we have chunks of our lesson where we identify what we'll be doing to individualize that lesson. If we have a little one, let's say, who can't cut, what are we going to do to help that little one when we're doing a cutting activity? We want to make sure that all of that is written out clearly. so that we have a record of what it is that we're doing. And then we're going to address each of the domains, which we're going to talk about today. But these domains, we're going to break down what it is that we're going to be doing so that year after year after year, once you have these domains outlined for what you're doing for each lesson, you can just carry them over from year to year to year. Okay, I saw a couple of comments pop up in the chat. Allowing children time to move from one activity to the next is important. Transition enables frustration and anger, right, to be dissipated. I get it. It prevents it. They'll get frustrated, they get curious, and that's where trouble happens. So that's why each of these pieces of the lesson plan are important. So we're not asking you to upload this lesson plan so that we can test you and make sure that everything you've learned has been put into practice. It's a reminder to you that I need each of these pieces of the lesson plan, and I need to be doing it every day. Any questions about that? All right, we can move on. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes. We're going to take a look at the developmental domains. So before I even start in on this PowerPoint slide, I will say to you with 100% honesty that Maryland has recently changed their early learning standards. And this is something that has been in the works for quite a while. And many, many people have seen the latest version that has come out of the Maryland, of the early learning standards. And they're very different. There are now 5 early learning standards, and they're broken down by age group from birth through 48 months. So they stop at the age of 4. Right now, that is something that is very new in its delivery. Maryland Excels is maintaining the original 4 domains for infants and toddlers and 7, or really 8 domains for preschool. Really and truthfully, the new standards are incorporating all of these old standards. They're just breaking them down slightly differently. So they look a little different, but the point behind them is the same. So if you are keeping with the structure of the domains that we have here on the screen, you are going to be successfully implementing those Maryland early learning standards. Okay? So we're going to talk about them in the sense, in the old fashioned, the way that they used to be before about a month ago when they came out with this revised version. So infants and toddlers, there are 4 domains that we look at: personal and social development, language development, cognitive development, and physical development. When you think about it logically, our little ones, they're growing by leaps and bounds. Physically, they're growing by leaps and bounds. We're seeing them sprout like so quickly. And then their language, they go from that babbling to a little bit of chatter to saying 1 or 2 words to stringing words together. So that language development and that cognitive development are sort of working at the same time, hand in hand. And then they're also developing this personal and social development. They're figuring out how the world works, how to interact with other people who they come into contact with. This is where we see stranger danger, right? Our little ones are panicked when they see someone new, someone they're not familiar with. They have to learn how to react to new people. The preschool domains take those 4 infant domains and they just separate them to be more specific. So we see the personal and social development. That doesn't change. We see that again in preschool domains. Language, the language development now adds literacy, because now we're looking at books and we're trying to read books and we're trying to interpret books and we're learning about this is the cover and this is how we read from left to right and all of that good stuff. We talk about the cognitive development of infant and toddler now becomes mathematical, scientific, social studies, the arts, physical development, and health. So physical development and health used to be one domain, and then they separated it because they realized physical development, that's all about our fine motor and our gross motor skills and how they develop and how we can focus on that. where health is really about not just being physical, but what do we need to do in order to have a healthy body? And it's not just exercising. Trust me, if you saw my bottom end, if I stood up, you would know physical development is just a wee little piece of it. There's also getting proper rest, getting proper nourishment, making sure that we have the right vitamins, that we have protein, that we have all of these things to be healthy, making sure that we brush our doggone teeth, something my teenagers really struggle with. So that's something major, making sure that we take a bath and we use soap. It's not just a water bath. We use soap. That's all things that we want to make sure we're introducing to these little ones at this young age, because it will carry through with them as they continue to learn and grow. Questions about the domains and the titles of the domains before we go into them a little bit more in depth. Kylie.
Yes, sorry. I know that my question was answered in the chat, but just to clarify, that age cutoffs for, I know infants are cut off at 2 years old and then they transition to toddlers, but at what age do toddlers transition into preschoolers?
So preschoolers, really, it's 36 months. So when they're 3, but remember, that's just the age. It's not necessarily the developmental level. So you might have a 3-year-old that really is speaking like a 2-year-old. You know, they haven't quite grown that much. That's okay. This is a guide. So if you are working with a 3-year-old class, you may be incorporating some of the infant and toddler domains in the first couple of months, and then moving on into the pre-K domains as they move later on towards January and beyond. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank
Good.
you.
You're welcome. That's one of the major things that people are very confused about with these new standards, because they stop at 4 years of age, when really we're used to pre-K going beyond to the age of 5. And I think that someone had a question in the chat. Please feel free to unmute and ask. I think it's Miss Colorado.
Hi, I'm sorry. My name is Natalia Quintero. I'm actually working on moving up on my grading in the Maryland Excels, and I'm having issues with actually these BAP 5 and 6. I just want to ask, when working on these like weekly schedules and activities for the kids, are we supposed to include, for instance, when working with preschoolers, are we supposed to include the 7 domains each day, or is like, should we make sure we implement the 7 of them throughout the week? Like, what's the expectation for that?
You can do it either way. My recommendation is to do it based on the week. For instance, when I would do a lesson, if I was doing a lesson on insects, let's say, bugs, different kinds of bugs, in my different areas, in my math area, I might have them counting spots on a ladybug. And that was a center that the children could go to throughout the week. It's not something that maybe everybody would do one day. Maybe in the science area, we would have them looking at insects under a microscope, or we're using a magnifying glass. So really you have that flexibility, but at least by the week.
Okay, so the expectation is not for us to have an activity covering each domain every single day.
Correct. It's going to be happening every single day because you have your center areas set up that way.
But like what I'm presenting to you guys, like to Maryland Excels, the expectation is not to have like, okay, on Monday we're gonna do math, language, science. They're gonna go like throughout all of them, but okay, I got it.
Yeah,
thank you.
You're gonna be doing it all week long. So no, you don't have to say, here's where I'm doing math, English, social science, like every single day. You cover it by explaining what you're doing throughout the week.
Okay, thank you.
And we had Blessed Daycare put in the chat just a breakdown for those of you who might not know. Infants are 0 to 11 months, toddlers 12 to 23. our 2s, and then our 3 through 5 is pre-K, and then kindergarten, 5 and 6 years old. Thank you for doing that. All right, any other questions before we move on? Oh, Miss Edith. It's Miss Edith. Hello, Miss Edith. Thank you for putting that in the chat. If you all haven't met Miss Edith, please make it your absolute priority to meet Miss Edith. She's one of our family providers, and she's in Baltimore County, and she is about as fantastic as they come. So make sure, if you haven't had the opportunity, that you spend some time with her. Plus, she gives the best hugs ever. All right, moving on. What I'd like you all to do in this moment is take a look at this picture on the screen. You know that we're going to be talking specifically about our pre-K domains here. I want you to try to assess which domain is being represented by this picture. And you can just unmute or put it in the chat. Kylie said music, movement, and social. Another vote for music. Mr. Asim said social personal. Another for music. Okay, so somebody who said music, could you please explain what you're seeing? So in the chat, we see playing music. So you see children sitting together in a whole group, each with instruments. So they're playing these instruments, and that's how it taps into the arts, which includes music. But some of you said that, oh, we have somebody who got kicked out. Some of you have added other domains, things like physical development. So unmute and share. How is this physical development?
Well, depending on the instrument that they have and the activity you're doing with the instrument, they could be using their fine motor skills to pluck the strings on the guitar, or their coordination skills, trying to move the tambourine to the other hand, depending on the age. Or you could be getting up and attempting to play the instruments while you're moving and dancing around, which is fine motor, coordination, and just overall like basic motor skills.
Excellent. Someone put in the chat counting. So we have math hit here. How are they counting, Miss Valerie? How are they incorporating that math piece?
It could be because when you're playing different instruments, you have to kind of count it out. So it could be something as simple as like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So you could be incorporating math in that as well.
And math doesn't just have to be counting. They could be tapping the beat.
Yep, absolutely.
And the children are mirroring that. So now we have physical development. We also have, we're getting those listening skills in there. So there's a little bit of social studies, and they're incorporating math because they're tapping a beat. Excellent. We had personal social. Who wants to explain about that? Can anybody explain who is doing? Oh, here we go. Fine motor, got that. Depending on musical instruments, they can be cultural too. Excellent, Ashley. That's correct. So the social aspect of it here, is everybody playing at the same time? They're not. They're listening to one another. They're taking turns. It looks like the teacher is interacting with them, talking to them. There's that social development. So this one activity that seems very obvious, well, this is the arts because it's music, actually is covering a million domains. It's covering all of the domains. So to my friend who asked the question before, Miss Colorado, it says Colorado on my screen. When you asked that question, do I have to prove where I'm doing this all day long? You are doing it all day long, every day, in every activity. You just want to make sure that it's identified at least weekly, where it is that you're focusing math, where it is that you're focusing your science and your social studies. But this is happening. These different domains are happening throughout the day. If you are a teacher or a program that focuses on the children and on enhancing what they're doing, you are going to be hitting these domains all day, every day. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So we're going to kind of break down each of these domains into a little bit more detail. And this is where I'm going to ask you to give the most feedback, because I'm going to ask you at the end of each of these domains where you see this in your program. And the reason that we do that is because we learn a lot from these PowerPoint slides, but we learn even more from each other. So tap into your colleagues' brains, tap into their programs, see what they're doing, share those ideas, and take those ideas for yourself. Okay? So social and personal development is our first one. And for those of you who are like me and who are visually challenged, I am going to read the little blurb on the screen so that you can follow along with us. But then we're going to go into a little bit more detail. So social and personal development includes the skills necessary to regulate one's own behavior and emotions, develop healthy relationships with adults and other children, and create a sense of positive identity. I always say that I can very quickly identify the teenagers that didn't go to pre-K based on the way that they are with others. Those that have been in pre-K and that learned these social and personal cues come into a room and say, "Hi, how are you? My name is so-and-so," as opposed to my son, who I promise you got all of this education and grunts when he walks in the door. So very different. We want to make sure we have less grunters and more children that are interactive. So within your environment, you want to create opportunities for the children to develop relationships with you as the educator, relationships with their peers that can help to foster those relationships. You can help them to learn ways also to self-regulate their behaviors, their emotions, to focus, to follow directions. So the social piece is how we are developing those relationships with others, whether they're adults or children. And the personal development is the piece where we're learning how to self-regulate. When we get angry, what do? How do we handle our emotions? If we want to cry, what does that look like? Where do we go for help? Can we follow directions, helping to give them those cues that they need? The social and personal development is all part of the executive function. Executive function skills facilitate the behaviors required to plan and achieve a goal. So many early childhood experts view the executive function skills as the most important skills that are learned and developed through the early years. They're really not fully developed until early adulthood, but it begins now. If a child is struggling to regulate their own behaviors and emotions, they're going to struggle in every single domain. Remember when we looked at Maslow's hierarchy? If that child doesn't feel safe and secure and loved, guess what? They're never going to be able to learn. They need to have those basic needs met first. So we have to model these skills, teach these skills, encourage them, and practice them every day. Now, where do you see social and personal development in your programs? Go ahead, Kylie.
So my day kind of starts out with a little bit of personal development, which is they can come in the door. I have like a chart of names, like little card names, and they can hang up their jackets, and then they go and they find their name. So it's like name recognition, and then they can identify which peg is going to be theirs. So it kind of gives them their own individual space. And then we sit down for a group activity. We identify the weather, like whether it's sunny, and then they can each individually select how they're feeling for the day. Like, what's my starting point for the day? And then the social skills they play obviously with each other throughout the day. And then if we have an emotional incident involving one child, there's a calming corner with like an emotional mirror, and the characters from the movie Inside Out, which most of them know at this point, so they have like plushies and charts that they can identify their emotions. But if we have an emotional incident that happens with more than one student, we do what's called pause hands, and we say pause, and everyone has to show timeout hands, and we have to drop all the toys and just stop, and we'll sit and we'll go around the circle until everyone's ready to participate in deep breaths, and then we talk through what happened. And this even works with my 2-year-olds, as long as they can talk, they can say like, they got pushed, they hurt, they wanted that toy. So they're learning how to communicate with each other when emotions were high, but they're also learning how they needed to calm down, respect each other first, and then move forward through to a solution. And when they first learned the process, it was hard to get everyone to participate. But now that they know the routine, they actually, by the end of it, are laughing. And I'm like, okay, one last breath. And everyone takes a big breath together. And then everyone screams, unpause. And then all chaos breaks loose and everyone starts playing again. But it seemed to really work. And it seems to get everyone to really interact with each other, learning to help each other calm down. And sometimes you'll even have students that will recognize the students that are getting out of control. And one of my 2.5-year-olds is actually the best. And she'll like walk up and she'll say, you need to take a breath. Do you want a hug? And then she'll like walk the little ones like over to the calm corner and like shove stuffies at them and be like, you need a stuffy. You need to hug a stuffy. So it's really amazing, like the things some of the younger kids are emotionally capable of. Because originally I wouldn't look at a 2-year-old and be like, she's the most emotionally mature out of everyone in my program. So that's what we do.
I absolutely love every single one of those ideas. And the beauty of all of them is that you can use them, all the ideas you gave at any single age, because it sort of goes across the gamut. You're teaching them self-regulation because you're teaching them to pause, take a breath, which is what we need to do as infants, toddlers, pre-Kers, and adults. You need to stop and take a breath. So you're adding tools to their imaginary toolbox for how to handle situations. And you are accommodating children like me who need to not just hear it, we need to see it and touch it. So by having those tangible items when they go into their little calming corner, when they can see the different pictures of the faces, look in the mirror and see which one their face matches, huge. It's just huge. And by putting words to their emotions, that is even bigger. Lots of people in the chat said things like sharing is caring. We are family. I love the pause hands. The best social and personal development occurs in my program where the children are outside and sharing play equipment. We cover the student domain throughout the day, from opening school to the outdoor activities and dismissal time. That is actually the absolute best answer. It's all day, every day is where you see this in your program. When children sing the hello song together, they hug to comfort or congratulate, cooperate during small group activities, etc. Absolutely correct. Ashley, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, like, honestly, on a day-to-day basis, depending on the centers you have, it perfectly includes all the social and personal development, because whether it's blocks, they have to learn to build together, learn to share, housekeeping or dramatic play, whatever we're calling it nowadays. They have to work together to create whatever imaginary environment they're in. And this past year in our pre-K program, we started a whole unit that once a week we called identifying our emotions. And each week for 20 weeks, we went through 20 different emotions and showed them examples, how it feels, what's positive and negative, and how they're all important. And that it does, like, just because, being sad is seen as a negative emotion, it's not, because sadness allows us to learn how to get back to regulate ourselves. And yes, it's okay to be sad, but it's not okay to hit Tommy because we're sad. That
Yep.
type of situation. And it worked really well with our pre-K class this past year.
Honestly, I know that this is a personal note, and I try to stay away from that, but I feel like this is what we were missing in the school systems as a whole after COVID. Kiddos forgot whether they were 5 or 15. They forgot what it was to have an emotion in front of other people, and they needed to be reminded, I'm having an emotion. How is it appropriate that I deal with it? So it's not just the emotion, it's how we react to it. And that's a big thing. I feel like we almost had to push the reset button, and that life would have been a lot easier if we could have done that. So that is a really, really, really important statement that you made, taking the time to identify all of those. Yeah, I see here, yes, my son was so isolated during COVID. It really was eye-opening to see, like, the most basic skills are these social and personal skills that we have. If you don't have this in place, you cannot move on. And these kiddos, for the first couple of months after COVID, they weren't learning squat because the teachers were having to backtrack and reteach them how to be a part of a group and reteach them how to interact appropriately and react appropriately with each other and within themselves. So very, very important. Great feedback from everyone. Let's move on to our next domain. So next we see language and literacy. And it says here on our screen that it includes both receptive and expressive language. So expressive language is how children are able to communicate with others. And that might be verbally, it might be through body language, it might be through their reactions or their emotions. Receptive language is how children process and understand what others are saying. There are strands found in the language and literacy domain, and they are speaking and listening, language, reading, and writing. So I know that I say this in my own world all of the time. It's not just what you say, it's how others hear you. And this is all part of that expressive and receptive language. So we know that children learn language through hearing it, and classrooms are certainly not silent spaces. We use a ton of different types of language. We use self-talk. When we're narrating what kiddos are doing, you might see a child that is sharing and you say, oh, I see Ashley sharing with Donna. What a great job. You might see a teacher doing self-talk. I need to go wash my hands before I sit down to eat. There's parallel talk where we're narrating not just what one child is doing, but what's happening between children. We're asking questions and making sure that some of those questions are open-ended, meaning they have more than one possible answer. Children are listening and learning constantly. They're not only learning the words, but they're learning the patterns of speech and communication and conversation. They're learning grammar. When we talk to babies and young children, we're laying the foundation for that language development. And you can do this long term. We can start when they are a brand new infant and move beyond that. Receptive language, that's that piece of how are they processing and understanding what others are saying. We see that in how they follow directions, or if they're understanding the conversation and what we're asking them to do, asking them questions and having them answer appropriately, and telling stories and having them retell the stories. That tells us that they understood what they heard. Literacy can also include books how to hold a book, how to turn the page. Doesn't necessarily mean can they read or can they identify sight words. Can they hold a book appropriately? An infant is going to hold it upside down and in their mouth. As they grow, they'll learn they hold it in front of them and how to turn the pages. Eventually, as they get up to preschool and beyond, they're going to learn how to track from left to right, moving into letters and putting letters together to make words and putting words together to make sentences. When we talk about literacy, we're also talking about print. Print awareness should be extended in all areas of our classroom, meaning we have labels everywhere. We have signs. I see plenty of classrooms that have stop signs when they get to the door because they know they shouldn't go any further. Menus, like in their dramatic play areas. Any place where it can be demonstrated that spoken words are represented in print, do it, do it, do it. Exposure to print is so necessary in the development of pre-reading skills. And we can even make modifications for our nonverbal children using things like sign language, symbols, picture cards, those sorts of things, and also support our multi-language learners by including labeling on our toys, with pictures and things like that, identifying in multiple languages. This is a truck, and this is what it's called in Spanish, including books and other print materials to reflect the languages of the families represented in your program. Where do you see language and literacy in your classrooms? We'll take 2 examples. Oh, Miss Edith said family pictures. That is such a great, I love that. Oh, a chalkboard. That's a wonderful idea. Miss Ahmad. I saw your hand go up, but I don't see you. Well, while we're giving Miss Ahmad a moment, we'll say, Edith said writing pads in each center, real pictures taken from their environment, spectacular. And then, of course, those family pictures, which are just amazing. Miss Ahmad, were you able to unmute?
Yes, yeah, we are. Yeah, this is with Ahmad and Deka. We're saying expressive language. We have a child who didn't know how to express himself when he joined. He was already 2, but he will grab whatever if a child has a toy, he will just grab it, and like if the other child, the fight began. So we were able to tell, like, you wanna that toy, he has it. There is a way to ask, say, can I share? Can I, use it? So over time, he get the hang of it, and he start using his language. I think he didn't have enough vocabulary, even though he was 2, to what he needs. So he only knew how to just grab it, and if he doesn't get it, he will fight or bite or.
Yeah. I absolutely love that you said that, because there are so many children that we feel like they're not communicating or they can't communicate, but they are communicating. If they want my drink and they point to it, they want my drink. This is something that it's really important. And this is why in the beginning we talked about how can we get to know our kids and what they're interested in. Spend time with them, watch them. You will learn how to communicate with them the way they need that communication to happen.
Yeah, there's sometimes actually he want to say even, but he's crying. We have to name 10 things to find out what he's actually wanted. So like eventually we get he's able.
And sometimes you can just say, show me.
Yeah, I think, you're right. This is that. I didn't get that one, but I think we named 10 different things that eventually will land to what he's trying to get at.
Yep. How many times have we had conversations with our own children like that? They're saying something and you're like, what are you saying? Don't understand. My nephew would say to my sister, that's a little eagle, like the bird. And we were like, what the heck is that? What is he trying to say? It's a little eagle. He was trying to say illegal. So like when he would see a police car, or something like that, he would say, that's a little eagle. And we were like, this doesn't make any sense. Is there an emblem? And you're trying to piece it together. But You'll work at it because you love these littles and you want to get to know them and you do your very best to interpret what they're saying. Really great examples here. Let's move on to our next domain. Mathematical thinking. So this is always a fun one because people are always like, I don't do math in my program. Yes, you do, because math is not just counting, okay? Everyday examples of math are all around our kiddos. Early childhood educators should really create opportunities for kids to learn and manipulate mathematical ideas throughout play with exploration, analysis. So here's some basic ones. We have skills related to counting and grouping. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're counting dozens and dozens of items. We might be grouping. We take out a bunch of play food. Let's put all of the fruit in one bucket and all of the vegetables in another bucket. That's grouping and that's math. Operations and algebraic thinking. I always love this one because people are like, I do not teach, which is why I made that joke in the beginning with Donna. And I said, you know, Donna's doing algebra. I do not do algebra in my program. Yeah, you do. If you have a child that is helping you set up for snack, let's say, and they're putting out forks for snack time. If you have 6 friends, but you only give the kiddos 4 forks, they're going to say to you, I don't have enough. And you say, well, I gave you 4 forks, but you need 6. How many more do you need? That's algebra. Just in that conversation, that regular conversation, you are incorporating these concepts in. There's, we learn numbers, about numbers, precision and value, and their interaction with each other through number relationships. So things like making groups of 10 or groups of 2, measuring, data analysis. So we use everyday items to measure and compare. We talk about the weather. We might use outlines. I know we always did, like, we outlined our body on chart paper, and then we could maybe use a paper apple and measure how many apples tall we were. We're doing geometry when we're talking about shapes. We are using spatial awareness in that realm as well. You have to keep in mind that learning occurs through this instruction and play and storytelling. You're using the language of math throughout the day too, and in all the domains. It's not just looking at things like addition and subtraction. I want to know what mathematical thinking you use in your program. I know that when we did a unit in the fall about apples, we would always give the children a piece of red apple, green apple, yellow apple, and we would let them taste it. And they would choose which one was their favorite. And they would take that color apple and they'd put it on a chart. And then we created a bar graph. That was a bar graph made of apples. You don't have to know we made a bar graph. They don't have to know that we were graphing apples, but we were able to put, what is your favorite apple? Oh, I like red. Put it up there. How many red do we have? And we would count them. How many green? How many yellow? Which color apple did our class like the best? Which one has the most? That's math in all its glory in the classroom. And the children are not going to identify it as math. They're going to identify it as, I got to taste an apple and pick my favorite. And most of the kids in the class liked my color. Miss Edith is right. Make an apple pie. Guess what? You're measuring. That's mathematical thinking, using those measurements. Great, great ideas. Do we have any questions or anyone who can tell us what they do to add math in and out of their day? We had lots that went in the chat box.
We do it in the classroom in the morning and in the afternoon, or morning, especially when they come in. We'll have the kids, they'll move their name and their picture over to where they're like here and not here, can count, okay, how many friends are here, how many friends are not here, kind of deal. The other thing is, in one of my classrooms, we've got I guess, within centers, how it can get overcrowded. They travel with little tickets so they can go into each center. So they can already count, okay, if there's 4 spaces, only 4 friends can go in there. So that's one that'll help with managing how many kids are in a center. 2, reinforcing, okay, how many spots are left,
That's a great example. And you're hitting on, like, now we're learning adding and subtracting, and there's algebra in there, and there's spatial awareness in there. It's all sorts of mathematical aspects pinned throughout the day. And I saw somebody pop something in the chat that was a great idea. Besides the baking projects, we did talk a little bit about that. Graphing with colored goldfish or M&Ms, that's always a fun one. And pizza at lunch. So you have this big round pizza and you cut it in half and say, oh, how many pieces do I have? I have 2. Oh, is that enough to feed everybody? Nope, it sure isn't. So you cut another one. Well, now how many pieces do we have? We have 4. Is that enough? No. And you keep going, so on and so forth. That's a fun one. Miss Sharita said, we do the cha-cha slide, which counts and steps. I love it. That's a really great one. Music and movement. You do it throughout the day. It incorporates a lot of math. Great examples. All right, let's move on. I kind of feel like scientific thinking and math sort of go hand in hand. This is where children develop scientific thinking skills when exploring the natural and physical world around them. They like to ask questions, experiment, apply evidence, reason, draw conclusions, and communicate their findings. We see scientific thinking even when we are reading stories. We say to them, let's take a look at the cover of this book. What do you think the book is about? Guess what? That's hypothesizing. That's trying to predict what we're going to see. And then after we read the story, we talk about, we test our hypothesis. Were our guesses correct? Take a look at those conclusions. Were those guesses or hypothesis right? They learn through trial and error in scientific thinking. This is where we talk about our senses. We're seeing, we're hearing, we're touching, all of that is coming to light, whether we're in nature playing in a sensory table, no matter what we're doing. If we're baking, again, scientific, the way we mix ingredients. So if you're doing a baking activity, you're going to be interacting with the children. You're going to be doing a lot of language and literacy. You're going to be doing math. There's scientific thinking. There's that social personal aspect involved in that. Lots of times when we talk about science, we learn through sand and water. We learn through cooking, gardening, caring for a pet, watching the weather. So this type of scientific thinking doesn't just happen in a science center. It's happening throughout the day. We can do it outside, or we can bring the outside in, bring in some pine cones or some rocks or some snow and see what happens with it. When we are learning about insects, it's really amazing when you give the children scientific terms, like instead of saying an insect has 3 body parts, a head, a throat, and a belly, we can say the belly is called the abdomen, the throat is called the thorax. It doesn't mean they have to remember that. It's just fun expanding their vocabulary. Is there anywhere that you have scientific thinking in your program that you think is just off the charts phenomenal? I saw someone put in the chat box the sensory table, and that is exactly. Ashley, how about you? Ooh, a space projector. That's a good one.
So this year, we had a really cool science activity for Groundhog's Day that another parent who teaches kindergarten had said, hey, this is really cool. We did it in my classroom. Why don't you try it? And it was basically just playing with lights and shadow. We had a groundhog puppet. And we were trying to, explain the whole groundhog. If he sees a shadow, if he doesn't see his shadow, does the groundhog really control it? No. But why would he see his shadow and why wouldn't he? And we would play with the lights in the classroom. We had a flashlight. We had one teacher even bring out a phone flashlight because it was a little brighter than the emergency one that we had. And the children could compare which had the best shadow, which didn't have a shadow at all. Why, and they were all debating whether, how light it would have to be on one side or the other side of the room for the groundhog to see his shadow and stuff like that. And it really brought the idea of the groundhog home beyond just sitting there and watching him come out of the on the TV, watching him come out of the cubby.
And how brilliant is that? And simple, just a flashlight and some paper. That's all you need. And the kids are able to have these amazing conversations and get so much out of it. We have a couple of things in the chat. Using that space projector is a really good one. Using a magnifying glass, which us old people now have to use to see small print, but the kiddos can see things blown up and it gives them a whole different perspective. Looking through microscopes, building Legos, making a robot, vinegar and baking soda with food coloring. Who doesn't love a good volcano explosion? That's so much fun. Miss Ahmad, I'm sorry, Miss Valerie.
Shaving cream does wonders.
Oh, shaving cream is so fabulous. A, it cleans up your area. B, it smells heavenly. So absolutely, and you can do all sorts of fun things with it. Miss Ahmad, did you have something to add?
Yeah, but we have a total life. So the kids get to feed, and George, so when they come, they greet him. They take turn to feed him, and so the kids.
That's great on many levels because they're learning about the life cycle. They're learning how to feed and take care of an animal, another living creature, but they're also learning some health. The health domain is included in that because we can't go and touch the turtle and then put our fingers in our mouth. We need to make sure that we're using proper hygiene and those sorts of things. So each of these activities is really just lending itself to other activities, to other domains. We also had another comment in the chat that said growing plants in a baggie with seeds or in a little plastic or paper cup. Always a great idea. And Miss Edith said we're doing the butterfly life cycle right now with their gardening study. I love that. That's fantastic. Good deal. All right, let's move on. So social studies, this is the one that usually confuses people the most. And the reason is we don't typically think about social studies this way. Social studies gives children an understanding of their sense of self-identity and how people relate to one another in society. So when we talk about social studies, I know that my brain, when I think about social studies, only goes to geography. I think about, what states are on the East Coast, what states are on the West Coast, where is Asia in relation to the United States? And I was stinky in geography. So, but social studies is more than that. Social studies is about social structures, rules and the rule-making process. So if you think about social structures, when we're out in the world, we have laws that we have to follow, right? So that we don't do anything that's a little illegal. I love that, or illegal. We also have rules in our classroom that we follow to keep us safe and to make sure everyone can be heard and seen. There's a process for making those rules. We know that in our classroom, we can help our teacher make rules. Outside of our classroom, there are rules and laws that are made by the government. And talking about that process and how we have to do that is important, letting them know that if you have something to say during circle time, we raise our hand, and that way everybody has a chance to talk. Social studies also looks at social relationships, your family, your friends, your community, and how they all work together. And then it also incorporates economic relationships. If I go into a store and I want a banana, I can't just grab the banana, peel it, and eat it. There's something I have to do first. I take the banana and I go to the cashier at the register and I give her the banana and then I give her some money And then she gives me the banana and I can leave. So there's this process, this transfer of goods and services. We're teaching them now that this is how the world works. We're doing it on a small level in our classroom so that they can take those concepts out into the community once they are able to do so, once they're older and able to do so. I'm going to give you an example, and then I'll ask for one example from you all. Social studies, when your children are in their dramatic play or housekeeping area and they're playing restaurant or they're playing grocery store, and you see them put their little purse on their arm and walk up to the register and somebody's typing in the register and they give them their play money and then they put all their groceries in their bag and they leave. That's social studies at its best happening. When they're a waitress or a waiter and they ask, what do you want to eat? And you know, the kids say this every day. And they can jot down on their piece of paper a little chicken scratch, and then they go off and do their own thing. That's social studies. In the chat, I can see, let's see, interaction between children and with other children, children and adults, and their community with the broader society. Very good. The idea of taking turns, learning right from wrong. That's right. Learning that there are rules and that we need to follow them so that we can be safe. Taco and burger and donut store. I love that. At the Dramatic Play Center, and you have a cash register. That is a very interesting dynamic of food. Taco, burger, and donuts. That says heartburn to me. We do a pretend fruit stand in the spring and play with play money and toy food. I love that. They use cash and an ATM card. That cracks me up that they know what an ATM card is. Holidays, also a good way to do social studies. Absolutely. Sharing and bringing in a special toy and talking about it. All really exceptional examples of social studies. So it's not just the study of who lives where and in what neighborhood. It's also about rules. It's also about relationships. And it's also about how do we get something that we want, that economic relationship of the transfer of goods and services. All right, moving on. Community helpers is a great example there. The arts is probably one of the easiest ones to identify because that is anything dealing with music, dance, visual arts like painting and photography, and theater. And theater is wonderful, a great way to express ideas and emotions. This one is sort of self-explanatory, so we're going to move past to the next. Go ahead, Ashley. Thank you. Physical development. This is what we talked about earlier, skills related to muscle control, balance, coordination, our fine motor skills, our large motor skills. We see this in outdoor play. We see it in indoor play. We see it when we're doing music and movement. When we make a train and we all get on the choo-choo train and march around the classroom, or follow a pattern when we're moving across the room. That's all physical development, which is very different from health. So when we go to the next slide and we look at health, this is where we're talking about, go ahead, Ashley. This is where we're talking about learning and knowing about our body awareness, our wellness, how to keep ourselves healthy, that we need rest, that we need exercise and nutrition, that we need to be clean, we need to brush our teeth, all of those sorts of things. And this is something that you do without even thinking about it every time before you eat. You take the children to the restroom, you have them wash their hands before they eat. That's because we need clean hands. We don't want germs to get into our mouth. We talk to the kids about not putting toys in our mouth and things like that. That's where health is involved. All right, Ashley, we can go through the next slide. If you want more information about the Maryland Early Learning Standards, you can still find that information in Healthy Beginnings and in the Guide to Pedagogy, and then, of course, in the new book for the Maryland Early Learning Standards. Go ahead to the next slide. This is where we're going to play a little game, a little domain Jeopardy just for a few minutes. So what we're going to do, Ashley's going to go to the next slide, and we're going to take a look at the different categories. We have small group, large group, individual learning, transition time, and free play. What I'd like you to do is choose a category when I call on you. Doesn't mean you have to answer. Anybody can answer the question, okay? And if you don't know the answer, guess what? No whips with a wet noodle. We just move on. What we want to choose is the best answer. So in the picture that we showed in the beginning of the training of the teacher, the male teacher who had the children with instruments, we know that that touches on several different domains, but what's the primary domain? The arts. Okay, so Ashley, let's start with small group for 200. The question is the domain used when identifying words that start with the letter of the week. Which domain does this best fit in? Ashley, go ahead.
Language and literacy.
Hit it, Ashley. Language and literacy it is. Excellent. Ashley Serio, I'm sorry, I can't see your last name on there. So I'm sorry if I didn't get that, but could you choose the next category?
Okay, I'll do free play for 200.
Awesome. The domain used during sensory table exploration.
Science.
There you go. Show us the answer, Ash. Scientific thinking, exactly. Miss Valerie, choose our next category, please.
Individual learning.
For how much?
200.
She's a low spender, ladies and gentlemen, low spender. I thought she was going to be my $1,000 one. The domain used when a child puts a sticker on a map where penguins live.
Social studies.
Social studies. Kylie, you got it. Great job. Go ahead and hit it, Ashley. Awesome. Kylie, can you choose the next category, please?
Transition time for 1,000.
Yeah, there's my big money girl. All right. The domain used when children effectively use their pictures or name cards as a system of center management.
Social and emotional.
Language and literacy.
Personal and social development.
Social development.
I love this one. Everybody always has a different answer. It's my fave. Anybody else? It's social studies. Remember when we talked about rules, following rules? This is where that comes in. Although it can fit into every category that you guys said, the primary one is social studies, where we're learning about the structure of social rules and things like that. Okay, how about Mr. Asim? Could you pick the next category? He might not be able to unmute. So let me see. Miss Edith, could you pick the next category?
So free play, $600.
600. All right. She likes to go big spender, but not too big. The domain used when children put animals in their habitat.
Science.
Miss Molina said science. Let's see it. There it is. Great job. All right, Miss Molina, could you choose the last category for us?
Individual learning 800.
Excellent. Another big spender. The domain used when talking to a child during caregiving routines, like diapering or feeding.
Personal.
Language and literacy.
Let's see it, Ashley. You are both correct. Social and personal development is the one that it hits on more because you're developing that relationship during caregiving. Okay, Ashley, you can actually go to the next slide outside of here. Miss Atia, did you have a question? Nope, she just raised her hand by accident, I believe. So what we covered today, We talked about quality rating and improvement systems and identifying what they are, what it means to be a part of Maryland Excels, and what a quality rating and improvement stands for. We gained an understanding of the domains of development as they relate to Maryland Excels. Remember that I said we're sticking with the old way for now and not going to those 5 domains because really we're covering the same information. We practiced how to incorporate multiple domains into a single activity or learning area. And we explored intentionality and differentiation in developing activities and lesson plans. Go ahead, Ashley. There are a ton of resources if you want to get more information about the domains. There's, of course, the Maryland Excels website, the MSDE website, your local resource and referral agency, the NAEYC, or National Association for the Education of Young Children, your local quality assurance specialist, and Ready at 5. These are just some resources that are tried and true. So I gave you a copy of this PowerPoint in your email that said that you were accepted into this training. You can go into any of these sites. They will link directly from here, and you can find more information. Go ahead, Ashley. Do we have any questions? You guys were an absolutely fantastic group. You had amazing answers. I absolutely loved all of your ideas, and I wish we had 2 more hours to, go through and tap into your brains and get more ideas. If you have any questions or there's any follow-up information you need, my contact information as well as Ashley's contact information is here on the screen, although Ashley's name is spelled wrong. It's Hensley, Hensley. In the chat box, I'm going to actually put a link for the assessment and the evaluation. You will need to complete both in order to receive a certificate. And if you were one of the ones like Miss Valerie, who wasn't able to originally sign in, please go to the pinned link and go ahead and sign in so we make sure that you have credit for being here for the class. Ashley and I will be here until 2:30, so we're going to give you at least 10 minutes to complete the assessment and the evaluation. It's important that you know that you need to get an 80% on the assessment in order to quote unquote pass the class. So if you have a question, please ask it. That's why we're here. If you feel like you're getting something wrong or you're not really sure what it's asking for, ask us and we'll be happy to help you. Otherwise, I'm going to be quiet for 30 seconds and I'm going to let you do the assessment and the evaluation. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate you and your input. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay, Rose.